Have you ever wondered how a simple conversation can completely change the course of someone's life? How a few words at the right moment can make the difference between giving up and moving forward? I lived through this man, and not as an observer, but as part of something that transformed me just as much as it transformed that young man. It was a fall afternoon in Long Beach. The sky had that orange hue that reminds me of my childhood, you know? I was leaving a studio after a recording session for my new album. I felt that satisfaction that only music brings, but I was also carrying the weight of some decisions I needed to make. The music industry can be relentless sometimes, and that day, my mind was occupied with contracts, tours, and expectations. As I walked to my car, the late afternoon sun hit my eyes, and that's when I saw him. A young black man, hardly more than a boy, sitting alone on a bench across the street. Something about him pierced my soul like a needle. It wasn't just his downcast posture or the way his shoulders curved as if carrying concrete. It was something in his eyes, glazed, distant, fixed on some point only he could see. Those eyes told a story I knew all too well. It was the look of someone who had already decided there would be no tomorrow. A chill ran down my spine. I felt that uneasiness in the pit of my stomach, that sixth sense I developed in the streets of Long Beach. My security guard signaled for us to keep walking, and for a second, I hesitated. Celebrities are constantly approached, photographed, invaded. Over the years, I've learned to create a bubble around myself to protect myself. But something about that kid pulled me like a magnet. A voice inside me screamed that this wasn't just any moment. What if I had ignored that voice? What if I had gotten into my Cadillac and headed to my mansion, comfortably isolated from the rest of the world? These questions haunt me to this day. Wake me up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, because I later understood that it was no coincidence I was in that place at that exact moment. With a gesture, I dismissed my security guard and crossed the street. With each step, I could see more details of that young man. The faded t-shirt with the image of a rapper I knew. The oversized hoodie on his thin frame. The worn-out sneakers on the sides. And especially the aura of desolation that emanated from him like a toxic cloud. The kid was so immersed in his dark world that he didn't notice my approach. Up close, I could see what wasn't visible from a distance. His eyes, red and swollen, seemed to have shed an ocean of tears. His hands, my God, those hands, were trembling uncontrollably as he held his phone, sliding his finger across the screen as if looking for one last answer, one last goodbye. I felt my own body react to that sight. My heart raced, my throat tightened. I recognized something primitive, genuine there. The instinct of one human being recognizing another at the edge of the abyss. "Hey, young man, you doing all right?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out softer than normal, almost paternal. The moment he looked up is etched in my memory like a photograph. First, the confusion, that expression of someone abruptly pulled from a deep nightmare. Then, the shock of recognition when his eyes met mine. I saw that reaction I know well when people see me on the street, that second of disbelief, the pupil that dilates, the mouth that opens slightly. But there was something more in that look. It wasn't the excitement of a fan, nor the thrill of someone meeting a celebrity. It was as if he was seeing a ghost or perhaps a sign, as if the universe had sent exactly the wrong or right person for that decisive moment. "Snoop Dogg?" he murmured, and his voice came out like paper being torn, rough, broken, laden with contained emotion. "This can't be real." His words came out interspersed with irregular breathing. I realized he was trying to process my presence there, as if I were a hallucination of his troubled mind. I sat next to him on the bench, not as Snoop Dogg, the rap legend, but as Calvin Broadus, the man who had been too close to the same abyss where this young man was now balancing. "It's as real as both of us sitting here, young man," I replied, searching for his eyes. "What's your name?" "M. Marcus," he stammered, momentarily seeming to forget what he was about to do before I arrived. "Marcus," I repeated, letting the name hang in the air between us. "Nice to meet you, Marcus." I extended my hand, and he looked at it for a moment as if it were something strange, alien. When he finally shook it, I felt how cold it was, despite the heat of that afternoon. It was at this moment, with our eyes level, that I noticed the marks on his wrists. Thin, reddish lines, partially hidden by the loose sleeve of his gray hoodie. Recent scars that told a story of pain that words couldn't express. My heart didn't just tighten, it broke. A knot formed in my throat, and for a moment I was speechless. Me, Snoop Dogg, who made my living with words and rhymes, was temporarily mute before this boy's abyss. What I saw in those marked wrists was a silent scream, a cry for help that no one had heard until then. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of that moment. Marcus wasn't just a fan or just any young man. He was a 17-year-old kid from South Central, raised in circumstances brutally similar to mine when I was his age. He was the reflection of what I could have been if certain people hadn't crossed my path at the right moments. "What's going on, Marcus? Looks like you're carrying the whole world on your shoulders today," I said, unhurried, my voice instinctively dropping to a lower, gentler tone that I use with my own children when they're vulnerable. Something told me I needed to tread lightly, as if walking on thin ice. There was a silence between us, the kind of silence that weighs tons and echoes louder than any shout. The wind blew lightly, bringing the smell of food from a nearby restaurant, the distant sound of horns from the main avenue. But there, on that bench, there was only a bubble of frozen time where two strangers connected through a familiar pain. Marcus looked down, then up at the sky, then at me. I saw in his eyes the internal debate, whether it was worth opening up, whether he should trust me, whether anything still mattered at this point. His fingers gripped the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "How long have you been having these thoughts?" I asked, discreetly indicating his marked wrists. He followed my gaze and quickly pulled his sleeves down, a flash of shame and panic crossing his face. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, there was something new there, a tiny, almost imperceptible spark of relief at having been seen. Truly seen. "You don't need to hide," I continued. "Believe me, man, I've been in dark places too. Places so dark, I thought I'd never see the light again." A solitary tear rolled down Marcus's face, glistening in the late afternoon sun. He quickly wiped it away with his sleeve, as if ashamed of this show of emotion. "My older brother," he began, his voice faltering like a radio with interference. He stopped, took a deep breath, and tried again. "My older brother was shot last week." The words came out of him like heavy stones that could finally be set down. Each syllable seemed to physically hurt. "He was all I had," Marcus continued, the words now flowing like a dam that finally burst. "My mom's been in jail for possession since I was 14. My dad, well, I never knew my dad. Jason took care of me since I was 12, worked 2 jobs to keep me in school." His voice broke, and he paused to regain control. "He was only 23, man." Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. The familiarity of that story choked me. How many young men had I known with similar stories? How many friends had I buried, victims of the same senseless violence? How many mothers had I seen crying over coffins? I felt my own eyes water, a visceral empathy taking over me. It wasn't just Marcus's story, it was the story of my neighborhood, my friends, my youth. It was the story that could have been mine if rap hadn't come into my life. "I can feel your pain, young man. For real," I said, and my own voice sounded strange to my ears, laden with genuine emotion. I put my hand on his shoulder, feeling him tremble under my touch. "I'm not going to offer you empty words saying it'll pass, because some pain never completely goes away." Marcus looked me in the eyes, surprised by my raw honesty. "But I'm going to ask you something important," I continued, holding his gaze. "What would your brother say if he saw you now?" Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, and I could see tears forming. "He always said I was the smart one in the family, that I was going to make it out of the neighborhood, go to college, and are you going to give up on that dream he had for you?" It was as if something broke inside him. The tears finally flowed, and Marcus began to tell me everything. How he had found his brother's body, How the college dream seemed impossible now without his financial support. How he was considering joining the same gang that probably killed Jason, because at least he would have a roof and food. And how that afternoon he had decided that maybe it would be better to just end it all. I was about to do it when you showed up, he confessed, showing the pills hidden in his pocket. I thought you were some kind of hallucination or sign. Maybe it was a sign, but not the kind he thought. I looked at the sky for a moment, internally grateful for having followed my instinct to stop and talk to him. Let me tell you something, young man. I've lost more friends than I can count. I grew up watching violence take people I loved. I've been in gangs, I've been in jail, I've been in places so dark, I thought I'd never see the light again. I paused, letting my words sink in. But every time I thought about giving up, something told me my story wasn't over yet. Marcus was looking at me with an intensity that few have, as if desperately searching for something to hold on to. Do you listen to my music? I asked. He nodded. Since I was a kid. Jason was your biggest fan? I smiled at that information. Then, you know my life wasn't a fairy tale. But look where I am today. I'm not saying it was easy or that it will be for you. But what if this pain you're feeling now is the fuel for something greater? As we talked, the sun began to set. The studio behind us was already empty, and my phone wouldn't stop vibrating with missed calls. But none of that mattered at that moment. I don't know what to do without him, Marcus confessed. You don't need to know right now. You just need to be alive tomorrow to find out. I replied. That's when I had an idea. Come with me, I said, getting up from a bench. Marcus hesitated, uncertain. Trust me, I insisted, extending my hand. I took him back to the studio. Luckily, I convinced the sound engineer to let us in again. When we entered the booth, Marcus looked confused. What are we doing here? Have you ever been in a recording studio before? I asked. He shook his head. Your brother liked my music. Let's do something for him and for you. I put on a slow beat, the kind of instrumental I use when I want to dive into something deeper. Now, I want you to talk about your brother. You don't need to rhyme. You don't need to be perfect. Just say what's in your heart. Marcus looked terrified. I don't know how to do this. Nobody does until they try, young man, I replied, adjusting the microphone for him. After a few minutes of hesitation, Marcus began to speak. First scattered words, fragmented memories about Jason. Soon, the words transformed into sentences, the sentences into improvised verses. The pain found an outlet through those words. And then, something magical happened. He began to cry, but kept talking. It was raw, it was real, it was powerful. When he finished, there was a sacred silence in the studio. The sound engineer, who had stayed to help, was visibly moved. What you just did, I said to Marcus, is transform your pain into art. And that's one of the most powerful things a human being can do. I gave him a copy of the recording. This is just between you and Jason now. It's yours. What you do with it is up to you. As we left the studio, it was already night. The stars were visible, something rare in Los Angeles. What do I do now? Asked Marcus. You live. One day at a time, I replied. And if you need help, I'll give you my personal contact. I know what you're thinking. Snoop giving his number to a teenager he just met? Sounds crazy. But that night, it wasn't about being a celebrity or being careful with my privacy. It was about one human being helping another. Before we parted ways, I asked, do you have somewhere to go? Marcus mentioned an aunt who lived nearby, but said he didn't want to burden her with his problems. Sometimes, letting people help you is the greatest gift you can give them. I said, don't take that opportunity away from your aunt. I called my driver and asked him to take Marcus to his aunt's house. Before he got in the car, I held his shoulder. Do you promise you'll be alive tomorrow? He nodded, but that wasn't enough for me. I need to hear you say it, Marcus. I promise, he finally said, with a firmness that wasn't there when we met hours earlier. God works in mysterious ways. I've always believed that. That night, for some divine reason, I was placed in that young man's path. And that wasn't the last time I saw Marcus. 3 months later, I received a message from him. He had re-enrolled in school, was living with his aunt, and participating in a support program for grieving youth. But most importantly, he had started writing his own rhymes and was helping other teenagers express their feelings through music. 6 months after our meeting, I invited Marcus to participate in a benefit show I was organizing. He took the stage with me and told his story to thousands of people. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. A year later, Marcus was accepted to a university with a full scholarship to study music production. Today, he works with my foundation, helping young people find in music an escape from their pain. Sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if I had ignored that young man on the bench? If I had gone my way, too concerned with my own problems? The truth is we'll never know. But what I do know is that on that day, we were both saved. Because, you see, I was going through my own demons at that time. Industry pressures, family problems, issues that kept me awake at night. That encounter reminded me of the greater purpose of my music and my life. Each of you has the power to change someone's life. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not so dramatically, but an attentive look, a kind word, 5 minutes of your time, this can literally save a life. And if you're like Marcus was on that bench, thinking you've reached the end of the line, I want you to know your story isn't over. The pain you feel now can be transformed into something powerful. Just stay for one more day, and then one more, and one more. As I always say in my music, life isn't about how many times you fall, but how many times you get back up. And sometimes we need a hand to help us up. Don't be afraid to extend yours. Don't be afraid to take the one being offered. And to you who are listening to this, pay attention to the people around you. That colleague who's too quiet, that friend who stopped responding to messages, that family member with a distant look. Sometimes, all they need is someone to genuinely ask, "Are you okay?" Marcus taught me that saving a life doesn't require superpowers. Sometimes, all that's necessary is to stop, look someone in the eyes, and really listen. And to finish, remember, in a world where you can be anything, be someone who makes a difference. Be the Snoop Dogg in someone's story. Peace out.